Declaration of John Anthony Jackson. I, John Anthony Jackson, date of birth 11 August 1949, of Altadena, California, make this sworn declaration of my own free will without any threat or promise. I repeatedly lied at the trial of Darnell Garcia on November 29, 1990, and throughout my entire testimony. I lied when I said that Darnell Garcia helped me steal 180 kilos of cocaine in Pasadena, California. The truth is that Darnell Garcia was not with me during that theft and had no knowledge that I was going to steal any of the drugs connected to that event. During my testimony at trial, I was under extreme stress and duress from government agents. DEA Group Supervisor El DeVecco and others with him threatened me by telling me that I would receive a life prison sentence and bring forth tax crimes charges against my wife, Barbara Jackson. At the time of sentencing, I was rewarded for the lies I told by receiving a short sentence for my crimes. I have in the past recanted my trial testimony to David Herrera, private investigator, only to again be threatened by DEA agents for doing so. My conscience and shame has compelled me to correct the lies I told at trial. I am willing to travel to Luxembourg and under oath appear before any court and judge to confirm this declaration of truth. I declare under penalty of perjury the foregoing is true and correct. This statement is given on October 17, 2014. Now I'd like to direct your attention to another co-defendant, Wayne Countryman. Wayne Countryman and I met during pre-trial discovery, and we discussed our testimonies. Well, at trial, Countryman couldn't get a story together, and he told a different story than I told. Also, Wayne Countryman never knew where the 180 kilos were kept. He had no idea. And also, he never knew any of the buyers. He was completely outside of the loop. As to the 180 kilos, 120 of those kilos went to San Francisco via a person we call Corvette Man, also known as El Severe. Sherman Laird and Goodman brought the rest. And additionally, maybe 8 kilos went to New York. In the late 80s, DEA supplied drugs to the Los Angeles area, basically Compton, and through Ricky Ross and others known to DEA. And then lastly, I'd like to bring up the fact that Darnell Garcia, unfortunately, had an axe to grind with El DeVecco. El DeVecco had an axe to grind with him. And this whole case really was about a vendetta that El DeVecco had against Darnell Garcia. Thank you very much.
Okay, bring it down.
My name is John Anthony Jackson. Today's date is September 27, 2015. This will be a continuation of an earlier statement given on October 17, 2014.
Mr. Jackson, tell how you decided to go wrong while at DEA.
Well, unfortunately, I got involved with a ticket scam. Guy was selling tickets. They turned out to be bogus, and I didn't know they were bogus. And when Internal Affairs got a hold of it, their recommendation was that first recommendation I should be fired. And then they came back with, well, poor judgment, they gave me 2 weeks off. Well, I was pissed about that because I had no knowledge that they were stolen. So when they came with that recommendation, that's what turned me around. I said, they don't give a shit about me. So I said, okay, 2 can play this game.
And what year was that?
I think it was 83, 84.
What was your reaction when you learned Garcia got 80 years?
I'll never forget that. I was traveling eastbound on the 210 coming up to the 605, and on 1070 that the announcement came over the radio that Darnell Garcia got 80 years for the drug case. I pulled over to the side of the road. I couldn't believe it. I was thinking to myself, 80 years. The people in Silmart had 2,000 tons. Didn't get 80 years. I was flabbergasted. I said, this is a total miscarriage of justice. Totally unfair to this guy. He didn't kill anybody. The people that kill folks don't get that kind of time. So I was dumbfounded. Dumbfounded, really taken aback. I had to pull over.
What was your prime reason for testifying for the government?
Well, the coercion. They threatened me with a life sentence. They had my wife involved in the transaction. She had nothing to do with that. So it was all about getting me to testify in a manner that was going to nail Garcia, and they didn't really care. And I was under pressure. I didn't want my wife to go to jail for something she didn't do. So that was my motive.
During the year you were awaiting trial, what was your mindset?
Well, at that time, I'm thinking to myself, who's going to testify against me? Then I thought, well, the only person that could really testify against me would have been Sherman Laird at the time. But then, in a previous conversation before this even happened, Sherman said, regardless of what's going to happen, he wasn't going to testify against me. And I took him at his word. But all along this case, I said, well, how did it even start? And I eventually found out what happened, which I could have kicked Sherman in his ass. The only reason this case came to fruition, came about, is that Sherman mentioned my name to someone he was giving the dope to. Unbelievable. What had happened is that Sherman took the drugs to his cousin, and his cousin's brother happened to be in the room, and his cousin said, well, where's it coming from? Instead of Sherman protecting me and just telling him, hey, if you don't want the dope, no matter where it came from, he gave the guy my telephone number. He gave the guy my name and where I worked. Well, the cousin's brother heard this, and I don't know, a couple weeks later, the guy gets pulled over FI. And before they get through with the investigation, he said, hey, I know a DA agent that's selling drugs. That's how this whole case started.
Do you recall the Turner case, older black man, South Broadway?
Yeah, that was a case Wayne and I were working on downtown LA. I think it was involved a kilo of I think it was cocaine. And we arrested him. Then we tried to get him to cooperate at the same time, and eventually told him that to order some more drugs, it would be to his benefit if he called his contact and bring more drugs. And which he did. He called his source, and the guy came over, Mexican guy came over, but he wouldn't flip. So that was the end of that deal.
Review list of cases you said Garcia was involved in at trial, truthfully.
Well, there was none he was involved in relative to this case. None at all.
Who told you to go into witness protection, and where were you?
I surrendered to Tallahassee, Florida, I think it was January 1991. I'm pretty sure it was. I was in general population for about 3 days. And the next thing I knew, I got called up and said, hey, there's a contract out on you. You got to go to witness protection. We're putting you in the hole. So that's what happened. And from that point on, I remained in the hole from that 91 until I got out in July of 96. I was in witness protection program. I didn't believe the contract personally, because I know Garcia, and I said, he's not going to do that, because he's going to realize that it wasn't my fault. When he finds out that the whole problem came from Sherman, that's, someone's going to get whacked. It should have been Sherman, but we weren't playing that role, so it should happen, and that's just what happened.
And review the list of cases you said Garcia was involved in at trial in regards to prison population.
There was none.
How often did you speak face to face with Carlin Joyce?
Oh, jeez, I must have spoke with her face to face 7 to 10 times before trial, maybe more than that. Probably was more than that, because I had to go down to their office building, and we had interviews for 2 or 3 hours, and at least 10 or 12 times before trial, at least.
And what was she asking you?
Basically, I knew they were after Garcia. That's the bottom line. And so they always tried to lead me down the road that was going to, so I would say something that was going to involve Garcia and put the noose around his neck. So at that time, I already knew what their motive was in terms of trying to put me in jail, give me a long life sentence, and then try to involve my wife on some nonsense. So I told them what they wanted to hear.
Did they release you?
No. No, I went on to, that was on house arrest. From that point on, I was on house arrest. But it's interesting how I went from, when we were in trial, at a hearing, I had a $1 million bail. And during this particular hearing, Garcia, he was in court, Countryman was in court, and I was in court. And during the proceedings, Countryman leaned over to me and says, "I'm throwing in the towel." So I said to myself, "You throwing in the towel?" So I said, "Well, that's interesting because 3 of us purportedly were involved. I've never seen a 2-leg table stand up." And that was the end of it. When he said he was throwing in the towel, I said, "Well, I'm going to follow suit."
1990, arrested in San Bernardino.
Yeah, one of my so-called friends, I rented a warehouse for them, and they bought some stolen merchandise over there, and TVs, I think it was. And when they were unloading the crap, trying to get out of my warehouse, police came in and I got arrested. The bottom line was, it was reduced to a misdemeanor. I did like 2 days in jail. 2 to 5 days, something like that.
In the 2014 case in OC, and your agreement with AUSA as to the truth in any court.
Yeah, I told the truth in that matter, and again, that's another point of contention because, you know, if you cooperate, of course, then they're going to make a recommendation to the U.S. Attorney for less time. But if you don't, then they're going to throw the book at you. So what better coercion is there? I mean, I'm not trying to get my head whacked off, so you cooperate. That's what they do all the time. You know, and if it came down to lying to save my ass, I'm going to do it.
Why did they call you King Jack?
Actually, Darnell gave me that name. And I think it was surrounded because I was basically, when you get right down to it, and I'm not blowing my own horn, but when it comes to undercover, I was told I was really the best they had. And I worked in Detroit, I worked in New York, I was all over the place. And for some reason, Mr. Garcia, he called me King Jack.
Did you receive the Attorney General Award?
Yeah, I did. I received the Attorney General Award. I think we flew back in 1987 to Washington, D.C. It was on the John T. McClain case. That was an interesting case, how that started. Because I was dealing with a low-level drug dealer, and this guy was good for a half-ounce. And so he took me down to Compton where we met another lady named Ella Hood. Ella Hood took us to a lady named Curtis Rideout, who took us to John T. McClain. So that's what happened in that situation. And we got 10 keys on the arrest when we hit his house. 10 kilos of cocaine. He had actually thrown the cocaine out of the window, and it landed in the alley where Wayne Countryman retrieved it. But he didn't cooperate at all. Garcia was nowhere around. He had nothing to do with that case.
How many times did you help Garcia with flatbed to haul gold from LAX?
Oh, at least 10 or 15 times. That was pretty interesting because I said, "How are we gonna get through customs?" And we didn't have to go through customs. Darnell, he had a key, so when you come off the flight, everybody had to depart to go downstairs to go through in customs. But Mr. Garcia, he had a key to the city. When we came off the plane, we just went out the top level where the departing passengers were leaving. So we never went through customs. It was a piece of cake. We were talking about hundreds of pounds of gold. We had a rack with wheels on it to carry because it was so heavy. But at least 10 or 15 times. We brought a lot of gold through LAX, for sure.
Did you know Saltarelli?
Yes, I met Saltarelli on a couple of occasions down at the Jewelry Mart because he was the big cheese. So yeah, I did meet him.
Did Garcia introduce you to Sinsberger in Zurich?
Yes, he introduced me to Beta Singenberger when we went over there. He took me right to his office, and I sat down with Beta, and that's what we created a trust, and he put the money in the trust, and I did all of that, and that was it. You know, he took over the trust, The money was $1.3 million that I gave to Beta Siegenberger.
Was Countryman paid to just keep quiet about stealing?
Yeah, we threw him a bone because he didn't know nothing. You know, when you get right down to it, he knew absolutely nothing. He didn't know where the drugs were. He was just really just a nobody personally.
Were you and Countryman, did you and Countryman grow up together?
Yeah, Countryman was from Harvard, Connecticut. We were friends back there. My father knew his father and mother and so forth, and it was one of those coincidences that we come out to California here. He's working for the same agency. So yeah, we have a little past history together.
Can you take a look at the report and if there anything you would like to speak on in regards to that report?
Well, this is a report conducted by Bradley Reed and El DeVetco, and it's an interview with me. And everything in here, in this file, in this report, was basically fabricated. When I read this, I said, none of this is true. So I said, but again, I'm saving my ass. So I told them what they wanted to hear.
And the date of that report?
The date of that report is September 24th, 1990. So I read it, I said, this is ridiculous. But again, I knew they were after Garcia, period, because he beat him in the civil rights case, and it was so unfair. But they had a vendetta for Garcia. They didn't care what they had to do to get him. The goal was to get Garcia. All right, and that's actually a recorded conversation between my wife and Garcia when he's in jail, and their only concern was to get Garcia. Everybody else was irrelevant in the story.
Any final details that you'd like to disclose before we?
Well, it's unfortunate that the corruption or the levels that the prosecutor went to and the agents went to Darnell Garcia was something he didn't do, and was never convicted of. Mind you, he was not convicted of any drug charges. So, and I'll say this: for Terry Harder to give this man 80 years. Was just, had to be unconscionable. I don't know what he was smoking. Like I said earlier, you got people that had 20 tons of cocaine that's killed people, didn't get 80 years. So this was patently unfair and disingenuous for I'm concerned of having to do something of that nature. I don't know why he was trying to bury the axe on Garcia, but he did. It's unfortunate, but that's what happened.
Thank you for the interview, sir.
You're welcome.